Hello, I'm Odin, and today I'm going to make another big prop from Final Fantasy VII. It's Barret Wallace's arm cannon, or Gatling gun. So it's about 22 inches long. It's actually not that big. With the barrels are about 12 inches, the cuff is about 10 inches. All right, let's do the barrels first. All right. The barrels I want to make are almost the same diameter as 1-inch PVC pipe. That's great. I start with the rings in the barrels. This is a piece of 1/8 inch foam PVC sheet. I trace my pattern onto the plastic and then mark the center of each hole. I use a 1/8 inch drill bit to drill out a center pilot hole in each of the plastic sheets. I set the radius of one of those knuckle buster hole cutters to be the right diameter for 1-inch PVC pipe. I also have a hole drilled in the wood. That's an 1/8 inch pop rivet under the orange wire nut, which lets me spin the plastic sheet to drill each hole. This way they're all the same distance from the center. I can use the center hole and pop rivet again with my bandsaw to cut the sheet into the circle that I need for the barrels. Because all the cutting is based off of that center hole, every sheet I cut like this is nearly identical. After this cut, I drill out the center to fit a 1-inch PVC pipe. I drilled a lot of holes. All right, so I've got 15 of these pieces, 7 holes per piece, plus a couple of extras that are a little small and some other testers that I did first. Yeah, I've already lost count. I don't know, there's 100 some odd holes I drilled. So, okay. The plan to make both rings is to start with a full-size thin ring, then a slightly smaller ring, and then 2 thicker full-size rings, and then another set of smaller and full-size thin stuff. The holes have a little wiggle room the PVC pipes should fit. It still doesn't weigh much because it's foamed PVC, and because these 2 inner white layers are actually a little bit smaller, I'll get the panel lines that are on the sides. The rest of it should sand out and look just fine, I'm hoping. So what I need to do is cut out the 6 barrels and the 1 centerpiece. All right. This is thin-walled 1-inch PVC pipe. I measure out the barrels, which are only about a foot long each. That's the entire length of the barrels. They look, well, it's gotta be cameras, but they look larger than that. That is not very long. Well, it's 2 inches longer than that, but still, that is frighteningly small. I'm gonna go double check my math. The round pieces fit, but it's a tight fit. I still think it's a great job. It was all cut by hand. So there's another 2 inches of barrel that goes on the end here, and then another 2 inches of barrel will go on top. So this will extend up to about that far. So it's actually gonna go that far. But that is actually the right length with all the measurements that I can figure. So I'm going with this as my barrel. I'll need to glue it here in a minute. There's another major thing that I need to do in order for this to work for me. Barret is missing something I'm not willing to give up for a costume. So right around here, I want to cut out a circle this size because my hand fits in there pretty easily. So I'm gonna make this fit there and put a cross beam in here so I can actually grab a hold of a little rod to help hold everything together. I cut the large ABS pipe so it just fits over my hand and wrist. I want it to fit inside of the barrel assembly. So I mark where to cut the bottom rings and cut both sheets so they fit over the large pipe. Then I mark the ends of the 1-inch PVC pipes and lay out where I want to cut each one so it'll slip over the large pipe. After a little work with the bandsaw, each pipe fits over the large pipe and inside of the cut ring. The large pipe stops where the first ring starts, and all the pieces still fit together. I drill a pair of 22mm holes so I can put a piece of 3/4 inch PVC pipe as a handle inside of the large pipe. Oh, it covers over it. Oh, good. I glue the 3/4 inch pipe into the large ABS pipe and start gluing the rest of the cut pipes on as well. The ring will keep the pipes in the correct place as I glue everything together. And then I can add each ring layer, gluing everything as I go. I've built up the first ring and I use spring clamps to hold the layers together as the glue sets. The placement of the second ring was easy. I clipped on the cut sections from the bottom over the 1-inch PVC to use as a guide for gluing. First I set this layer where I want it and then glue it in place, and then assemble the rest just like I did the first ring. I removed the supports, and now both rings are glued in place. I cut a section of 1-inch Schedule 40 PVC and glue a piece of foamed PVC sheet into the end. Now this is for the center, which is not a barrel. This would be the spindle or the rotation axis for the barrels, if they were to spin like they do in the game. You know what, that should be fine, even though it's not glued down there. It's glued up there. That should be fine. After the glue sets, I sand the edges of the rings and cut 2 large strips of floor mat foam. This is to bulk up the bottom of the barrels. And I have a large automotive timing belt that I can use for the gear teeth on the barrels. 2 strips are glued over the floor mat foam, instant barrel rotation gears. I seriously lucked out that they fit correctly right between the gear teeth. I use super glue and zip kicker to glue the ends of the belt together. I glued together 2 more rings of floor mat foam, but these are not glued to the barrels. They're the start for the cuff that fits over Barret's arm. This first layer is 10 millimeters thick. It's going to hold everything else that makes the cuff. I add a step down ring on the inside so it'll fit closer to my arm, and a 2 millimeter ring is added around the cuff. And then on top of that, a ring of 6 millimeter foam is added, and this one has a notch in it. All right, so I'm going to go here. So I now have an orientation. This is where the motor goes, so that means that goes on the inside of the arm. So this is because the motor will cover this whole seam, which is great. A small 2 millimeter panel covers the back seam, and this little panel is actually in the game as well. I glue 2 more rings to the outer end of the cuff. Now these will cover most of the rotational gears, but you're still going to see them. Another panel of 4 millimeter foam fits around the center. All of these layers help to give texture and shape to something that would otherwise just be a tube. And this project is really reminding me of one of my first builds. It's an upgrade. I will use the same 1-inch PVC for the core of the spinning motor. I want to wrap this with 2 and then with 4 so I can get the indents. Yeah. The foam increases the size of this pipe and keeps everything on the cuff the same material, foam. It'll paint more evenly that way. Jumping ahead, I have most of the details added to the motor. This smaller piece fits in the notch in the back ring, and I have supports made for the motor. These are 16 millimeters thick. Gluing the motor to the cuff is easy, just get it on straight. And I trace where I want the supports to go, so I know where the glue needs to be. Now these would be very easy to get glued on crooked, so I follow my pencil lines and stick them on correctly. And I add some 2 millimeter strips over the top of each one. It's more texture. Strips were added to the end piece as well, and I'm gluing this part in with wet contact cement because there's no way I could slide a tube into a tube with dry cement. I built up a strip of foam to look like the tensioner for the motor. Well, I assume that's what it is anyway. And I glue it in place with some tabs that go along the side. I can add screws to these tabs later. I also add a strip to be the track for the motor to move over. Again, I assume that's what this is for. I've never actually held or used a wrist-mounted Gatling gun before. The handle goes on the side by the motor. I suppose you would need one when you're not wearing it. And I use my heat gun to bend a 3/4-inch PVC pipe to make the handle. After it cools, I cut the ends, and the handle will fit into holes in the side of the cuff. I'll glue this part in after everything else is painted. So that's that piece. Okay, that's my template. And then the magazine needs to fit on this side, and it goes straight across, and it's a couple of boxes. This is the most complicated part. What I really mean is that the motor was the most complicated part. I cut a pair of sides for the small inner box, and I cut a strip of 4mm foam to cover the sides. I just glue the panels to the sides, cutting them to length as I go. 4mm foam is pretty thin. I add some floor mat inside to give it some strength and keep the biggest panel flat. The medium-sized CosTools hole drill adds the recessed bolt holes to the box, and some 2mm foam will hold the recessed circles in place. And for the outside, I make a decorative 2mm panel. And I'm burning panel lines into the foam with my new Plaid Crafts wood burner. Thank you, Plaid. Maybe I should wait until I have the magazine built so I can glue them on in relation to each other and they're not too tight. Because the magazine is almost exactly the same size as this. So yeah, let's do that. Now I just need the magazine. All right, it's kind of the same thing all over again. Probably should have cut some of this stuff twice to begin with. It's a little different. So I start with a cardboard pattern before I cut any foam. Then I trace the pattern to the foam so I can cut the parts on my bandsaw. So I got the one box that goes on one side, and I've made most of the magazine, or at least the portion that feeds, I have made the magazine itself that'll go on the other side. They're effectively the same shape, just one happens to be a little bit longer. Now I need to find the center because that's where the materia goes. The shape of the materia will be this 1-inch acrylic hemisphere. I just need to find the center of this plate on the feed housing. I carefully cut it out and press fit the acrylic into the hole. The plan is to backlight the materia with a cheap LED flashlight, but I want it green, not white light. So I cut a piece of green PVC sheet. Doesn't quite seem green enough. I cut a second piece of PVC film. Actually, probably should do this too. And then I also crumble the first piece and then tape them together. My hope is that you can see the wrinkles through the acrylic hemisphere, giving that crystalline look to the materia. You can kind of see the wrinkles a little bit. It's pretty bright, so it's pretty hard to see, but still, they're kind of there. So, camera can't see anything. But it's much greener, so I'm much happier with that. I'll be going with 2 layers. To hold this in place, I'm just going to drill a hole through a piece of that really thick foam, this stuff. To drill the hole through this bit of foam, I'm going to use my new metric Forstner set. Thank you, Starius, I appreciate that. He's one of my patrons who was nice enough to send me this. So I've got a 22mm Forstner bit, and I'll be able to make a perfect hole through this, which will be more than enough material to hold the flashlight in place. It worked beautifully. I'd back out the bit on occasion to let the ground up foam come out. That way the bit didn't load up and distort the size of the hole. I also drilled a piece of 4mm foam with a 20mm hole. This will help hold the acrylic in place, and I need to bevel the inside so that the panel will sit flat and not bulge around the plastic hemisphere. I use a round cookie cutter to make a 2mm ring frame that is then glued on top of the panel. I glue the panels to the front of the feeder box and press the smallest detail panel in place with a ruler. I cut down the thick foam that will hold the flashlight and mark where the curve of the cuff will be, which I then cut off on the bandsaw. Everything should fit on the cuff now. Yeah, that's it. I burnt some panel lines on this plate, and I add panel lines in the side of the box. The hemming ruler is a great guide for a wood burner. It's a parallel straight edge, and it keeps the burning bit a consistent depth. You get much cleaner panel lines. I decided to glue on the smaller box now, right up against the adjustment rails for the motor. I had measured where the magazine needs to go, so this box needs to be as far around on the other side as it can. I use a carpenter square to get the size that I want for the magazine, because it shouldn't stick out farther than the small box. The magazine will be 2 inches by 2.5 inches and just over 6 inches long. I cut each side full size, and then I use the bandsaw to put a 45-degree bevel on each edge. So when I glue them together, I just touch the edges first and then fold the panels up into a box. The magazine is curved a tiny bit. I think one of my seams wasn't quite straight, but I guess Barret just bent this one. I cut the ends to size, and then I can start adding panel lines. And there are multiple lines on each side of the magazine and some small screw holes around the bottom. The magazine just glues to the feeder box, and that's the bulk of the building. I make sure to cut a hole in the cuff for the flashlight to pass through once everything's glued together. Okay, I'm going to Plasti Dip all the foam, and while that's drying, I'm going to finish the flash suppressors that go on the end of the barrels. It kind of turns. Oh, it's not easy. Okay, cool. First, I tape off where I want the magazine loader to be glued. It's better to glue foam to foam and not foam to paint. To make the flash suppressor connectors, I cut short lengths of the thin-walled PVC pipe. I heat the pipe with my heat gun until it gets soft, and then push it over a piece of Schedule 40 PVC. And it keeps this shape after it cools. Then I can cut them to the length that I want on my bandsaw. I mark the same spot on all the barrels and glue the expanded pipe over the normal-sized 1-inch PVC pipe. So the last piece I need to make is the flash suppressors that go around the front. I've got some just over 2-inch pieces that I've cut that I can use, but I need to put the cutouts into them. I made a paper pattern with equal-sized cutouts and traced them onto each pipe. I used 2 different bits to do the cutouts. The long lines are easy to do with a cut-off wheel, and I used my smallest carving bit, clamping the Dremel into a vise, and then I could just slide the pipe along the bit, erasing the ink lines. A half-round file cleans off all the burrs from making the cuts. Sanding a taper onto the other end will make it much easier to glue the suppressor into the connectors. But I still need barrel tips, which will be a 3/4 inch piece of PVC pipe, wrapped in self-adhesive EVA foam, and pushed into the suppressor. I add some super glue to the bottoms to keep them in place. And then all 6 get glued in, and the barrel assembly is ready for primer and paint. Everything is painted a base black. The EVA foam parts are Plasti Dipped, and the PVC parts are spray painted. I'll paint the rest with acrylic paints. I just like it base black, but I'm going to finish painting it. The fun thing is, it's hard to tell if it's exactly light grays or silvers. So I think I'll go for some not so brilliant silvers. Nearly all the paint I use is PlaidFX paints. The light silver color needs a few coats to be a solid color, and with this many big parts, that takes a while to paint. I also use some grays. This darker gray is what's left from the paint that I mixed for the Gundam backpack. I also paint the flat sides of the rings the same dark gray. The barrels will stay black. And I continue to pick out places for paint, and I add some darker silvers and some lighter grays, calling out a lot of the details and trying to make it all look interesting. It may not look like it, but I'm about 3.5 hours in on painting, and I think I've finally got the base colors done. Now I need to dry brush it. I just lightly dry brush silver over most of the black. Now this isn't so much weathering and scratches as just defining the corners and making it easier to see the different black parts. I do add some scratches to the barrels, but mostly just the ends. Only the corners of the handle were painted silver. The center is still just primer, because strong back adhesive foam will stick better to primer than to the glossy metallic spray paint. And I'll just use 5-minute epoxy to attach the completed handle. There. Liquid black shoe polish is applied to the bright silver paint. Now this adds some weathering and it's a tarnished look to the pristine silver color. And when everything dries, I can install the materia orb. The acrylic hemisphere is pressed in place with a couple drops of super glue. I added a diffuser to the back of the wrinkled green sheets, and these are taped in place. And I apply contact cement on the inside and then place the flashlight holder piece while the cement is still wet. And everything is then glued together, making sure the flashlight fits into the hole in the cuff. For some motor details, I cut out 6 pieces of aluminum rod, and then I just super glue them around the motor right across the big gap in the middle. I also super glue some tiny screws into different places, which I think really helps with the mechanical look. Now those 2 pieces I never plan on gluing together, because it's probably going to be nice to be able to take it apart, to store it somewhere. There's a fabric sleeve that covers Barret's elbow. Now I'm going to use a nice thick fabric to do that. It's just a tube with a hemmed end, and a cut-up belt that wraps around the bicep. I use some leather rivets to hold the belt in place. There's another piece of leather on the backside because rivets can easily tear out of the fabric. And the sleeve is just glued right into the cuff with contact cement. Thinking about it, adding a Velcro seam here would have been a much better idea because you can wash the fabric if you can remove it. And I'm not left-handed, so getting the belt to fit right on my bicep is going to take some practice. All right. Most of the materials I used are available to order and have shipped right to you. I put a list and links in the description. Another Final Fantasy prop. So, are all the weapons huge? The armor is all small, right? What does Cloud wear, a shoulder pad? Anyway, I'm really, really happy with this. There's a lot more work went into this than I thought I was going to do to begin with, but this is something that I'm very happy to have. And honestly, even though it's built from foam in the back and foam PVC in the front, this still has some pretty good weight to it. I can certainly tell why Barret's right arm is still very huge just from carrying a metal one of these around. But you know, mine's foam, because this is how Odin makes. Yeah, that's one of the things I was wondering about. It's like, he doesn't have a right hand. Why is he so muscular in his right arm? Oh, yeah, that's why. How many trains went by while you were focusing? 0. How many trains went by while you're getting prepared to shoot? 0. How many trains go by once you hit record? All of them. With all the different layers, I have these two here that are actually a little bit smaller. Well, those actually are indented. There actually are. There are. This is me trying to talk. I built the thing. It's huge. Because that's how Odin makes. I want to thank Roberto Vasquez, Starius, and all of my Patreon supporters. My Patreon support is the #1 thing that makes this show possible. If you like the video, don't forget to subscribe. Have an idea for something for me to make? Please leave a comment below. And if you make any of these projects, you can send me a picture.